Welcome back to Inside the Paddock. This is episode number 21 for the Italian Grand Prix. It was a record-breaking 10th straight win in a row for Max Verstappen and a home podium for Ferrari at Monza. Some good racing all around, so let's get into talking about it. Welcome back to Inside the Paddock, episode number 21 today. Italian Grand Prix took place last Sunday, and it was a record-breaking 10th straight win for Max Verstappen, the all-time record for race wins consecutively. And not a huge surprise, but certainly a phenomenal achievement for Max Verstappen, and something that a record I'm not sure will ever be broken, especially if he lengthens that streak the remainder of the season.
I mean, we said the same thing about, or people said the same thing about Vettel's record back in 2013, right? So I guess it just depends on how long Max's record goes for.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, depends on how many more races he wins in a row and how big the calendar eventually will get. But, yeah, it's going to be tough to beat. Yeah, Italian Grand Prix at Monza. It was a pretty decent race. Some good battling for the lead towards the start. But once Verstappen got by Sainz, he didn't really look back. But some good hard racing with Sainz there at the start.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that he won it in an interesting race. He had to fight for it. It wasn't just there. He didn't win by 20, 30 seconds. He also had some issues, so there were definitely some question marks. But overall, I'm glad he made it. But I'm glad, especially seeing a Ferrari fight with him in Monza. But yeah, it was just a really good race. I'm surprised that someone was able to fight him for it, but I'm glad that they were.
Yeah, in some ways, I actually enjoyed Italy more than it did Zandvoort, because in Zandvoort, it felt like a lot of the action was due to the weather, and in Italy, it was just more of the pure hard racing, especially with Sainz getting very racy with Max, Leclerc, and Checo as well. It was very good to see, and very good to see, especially coming from the top teams as well. And of course, as a Red Bull fan, I really like to see Max take this win streak a bit further. But yeah, it was great to see him break the record. Like you said, Tim, a bit of a harder race. I didn't really expect Ferrari to be this competitive, to be honest. We kind of speculated pre-race that might have been the case, given the fact that their car is generally good in a straight line, as we saw in Baku. But do you guys think this is just like a pace thing, or are there other like factors that kind of made Ferrari more competitive here in Monza this weekend?
I really don't know what made them like better than Mercedes, but I think we've seen that this track would be tailored more to them rather than Aston Martin or McLaren, which continued to be the case. But I think it's just credit to the Ferrari team. I think they at least in qualifying, for the whole race, parked for a minute, they made more of a top speed setup, and it probably did give the tires a little bit more wear, but they were able to get pole with Sainz just barely, and then were competing with Perez for almost the entire race. So yeah, they set up the car to be able to go quick in a straight line, and Max was even getting frustrated towards the start of the race, saying after he failed to overtake Sainz that first time, he was saying that he's surprised at how quick Sainz is in a straight line, that he's struggling to get past. And I don't know how long Sainz would have stayed in front if he hadn't locked up. Probably not much longer, but it was still he still held him off longer than I think anyone thought he would. So
Yeah, and as you kind of mentioned, Charlie, I think the tire wear was the bane of Ferrari's existence this weekend. I would go further and say that it was probably the reason why, well, this is obvious actually, but it's the reason why they didn't win the race, really. If those tires don't fall off as quick as they do, I think Sainz stays out much longer, stays out in front much longer than he did. But I think you brought up a good point, Charlie, about their setups and how that low downforce setup could have caused higher tire wear. I think that's a good point, and it probably explains why the tire wear is really bad here, in combination with the fact that it's just generally been horrible this whole season.
yeah, so obviously, Verstappen getting past Sainz, Sainz locking up, good move. I mean, having the inside line into that second chicane out of the Curva Grande was a big advantage, and it was good to see so many fights kind of extended past the first corners through that long sweeping right-hander into that next chicane. So lots of good racing, but yeah, I feel like when drivers have that inside line for that first corner of the second chicane, it is really just game over, and that's what it was for Sainz. And but yeah, Ferrari with impressive pace. Even Leclerc was sticking with Max and Sainz kind of around a second back, but still within range to make something happen. Second place was Perez, qualified fifth. What did y'all think of Checo's race this weekend?
I'm glad that he was able to take P2. I think that looking forward, he needs to have a strong second half of the season. He qualified P5, which is weird to say that that's higher than he's been accustomed to qualifying this season. But I think especially looking on to Singapore, a track where he should be confident at, I think that him fighting with those Ferraris and eventually overtaking them, although he was in a superior car this weekend, hopefully it's a confidence booster going forward.
Yeah, I think Sergio deserves a lot of credit. Italy isn't necessarily the best track to overtake on. It's kind of like Silverstone in that respect, where usually there's a lot of DRS trains that form up. We saw this at the front with the train of Leclerc, Perez, and Sainz. It's very hard to overtake the car in front if the car in front also has DRS and stuff. So, yeah, it was a good race from Checo, but at the same time, I feel like P2 is the minimum in that car. It's basically the minimum result you have to get every weekend if you have a car as dominant as this year's Red Bull. But with that said, I think the future, like the next few races, they could be very good for Checo. Like you said, Tim, Singapore is a street circuit, and we know that Sergio is very good on street circuits, except for Monaco, of course. But, well, and what I mean is like he crashed this year. But, yeah, he's typically very good on street circuits. So I'm excited to see what he can do there.
Yeah, obviously Singapore was a pretty enjoyable race last year, and Perez did end up winning, if I remember correctly. So maybe he can mount a charge to break that streak next weekend. We'll see. Moving down, touch a little bit more on Ferrari. Obviously third and fourth in the race, about as good as they could have hoped for in their home race. And, yeah, I mean, I didn't really see them being that securely in that number 2 position this weekend, and they very much were. So, good job by Ferrari to make sure that they were ready for their home race, and I think that those fans in Italy are about as pleased as they realistically could have been.
Yeah, definitely. I think going into the weekend, we knew the Ferraris would be strong, but we didn't think that they would be as strong as they were, where they were challenging Red Bull and stuff as much as they did, especially on the straights. We know the Red Bull is very fast on the straights, especially with DRS. So for the Ferraris to hold them off as long as they did was quite impressive. We've talked a lot about the good racing in Monza this weekend, but I think we should also point some attention towards, some of the, the questionable driving this weekend, the questionable racing with Sainz weaving around the track and, cars going off track, Checo and Russell going off at turn one. What do you guys think about that?
There was definitely some incidents that, it gives the type of stuff that makes it hard for the stewards to kind of fairly dish out penalties or just make things right. There's a lot of, it's hard to go side by side into that first corner if you're not like one guy's hugging the inside, one guy's hugging the outside. So it's just, I think that if drivers weren't so aggressive, they probably wouldn't have gotten past as easily, and maybe they just needed to give it a couple more laps and get by before they entered a corner. But there's definitely a lot of subtle contact in the first two chicanes that, especially thinking about Hamilton or Russell or two McLarens came together, I think that just kind of avoidable contact, I guess. I don't really know how to feel about the racing this weekend.
It definitely made for more exciting racing. But obviously, if exciting racing means it's going to be more reckless, then that probably shouldn't be the case. I don't know. What's your thought on this, Kenji? That's sort of what I'm interested in.
Well, I was kind of thinking about Sainz, and I would argue that if Sainz isn't as aggressive as he is, where he's weaving around on track into turn one, weaving in the braking zone to turn one, I would argue that he wouldn't have held off the Red Bulls for as long as he did. And, perhaps Leclerc makes it past him on the last lap especially. So if you're going to be fighting the Red Bulls, you kind of have to be aggressive this year. But if that comes at the cost, and this is what I'm worried about, especially going into turn one where it's a very fast straight preceding it, if the cars make contact, some nasty accidents could occur. So on one hand, I think the Ferraris do have to be aggressive to be competitive with Red Bull, but on the other hand, I think it's extremely dangerous. So that's my thought. And I think the stewards need to be more aware of that. I was surprised to see how lenient they were with Sainz. I think he went a bit over the line, but at the same time, I kind of see their point where they're just kind of trying to promote hard racing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, with competitive racing, you're going to get moments where it gets tense, like Rosberg and Hamilton crashing in Spain, like Hamilton and Verstappen crashing in Silverstone a couple years ago. If it's two competitive racers, they're at the top of their craft, in the top machinery, although Ferrari's not even close to Red Bull. If you're going to be competitive, then you can't just back down, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess when it comes to weaving around on the straights, that's probably not necessary or just unnecessarily dangerous, I guess. But if Sainz wants to kind of put his car in a spot where it doesn't really give Verstappen enough room, it's kind of just, it's does Verstappen have enough, does he have the right to the space or not? Because it comes down to is Sainz just putting the car in the best spot to defend, which Um, he's just trying to do whatever he can to not let Max pass him, and I think what Max did well after that first kind of attempt was not trying to force anything, because he knew it was gonna. Sainz was defending hard. It probably would have ended badly if he kind of sent a move, and he was patient, and Sainz made a mistake himself, and he got back fairly easily, or got in front fairly easily. So I think it just kind of, if you know you're in the faster car, you can kind of be patient and let Sainz do all the defending he wants, and let him compromise his line ultimately, I guess. But I mean, I don't really know what to say other than that. I thought Sainz did a good job. I think Max, maybe he had right to more room, but like, I wouldn't reprimand Sainz for that. I mean, he's doing everything he can, and nothing significant happened between them in terms of damage, or so. That's my take, I guess. Leclerc and Sainz had some good racing towards the end, but Sainz was able to get back through on Leclerc and ultimately get the podium. But solid race for both of them. Solid weekend for Ferrari. Next up, we got Mercedes getting 5th and 6th. Kind of established themselves as the third best team this weekend. Both drivers got penalties for Russell early on, and Hamilton for kind of taking out Piastri almost. So, Mercedes have been a very kind of interesting team to me this year. They seem to never, and I feel like Toto Wolff says this, they've never like shown their actual pace. They always have something wrong, and I don't know if their pace was that great this weekend, but they seem to always just be kind of something goes wrong. This weekend you got penalties and kind of a lack of pace. So
Yeah, I would say P5 and P6 were like the maximum they could do. Even with, just building off your point, Charlie, about like things going wrong. I think Lewis was P8 in qualifying, so again, it's another one of those races where one of the Mercedes drivers just has bad qualifying. Sorry, something glitched out there on my end. But yeah, it was a scruffy weekend from Mercedes with a lot of penalties and stuff. But with that being said, I think P5 and P6 is still the best result they could have had given the pace they had.
real quick, I couldn't watch the last few laps.
I think I want to talk about the incident with Piastri, between Lewis and Piastri. On one hand, I think the penalty is very fair. I think it's the correct penalty to give to Lewis. But again, it's another question of stewarding consistency. If we think back to 2019, again, Italy, we saw Leclerc in the lead, and as part of like his defense, he forced Lewis off the track at Curva Grande, and there was no penalty there. So do you guys think this is just another like moment of inconsistent stewarding, or is there something else at play here?
So I have a couple questions because I couldn't. I stopped watching the race. I had to go somewhere right before this incident happened, and the highlights didn't really flesh it out. So I guess Piastri broke his wing, is what I'm seeing here. And then my other question, real quick, is how did Hamilton pull like 5-second gap on Albon, 6-7 second gap on Albon in like 4 laps or something? Because he didn't pass Albon with that many laps to go, I feel like. Is he just
Yeah, I think it was like 49, lap 49 he got through.
and it was only a 51 lap race. I have no idea how he got, because he didn't drop down with the penalty, did he? Or did he already serve it? I don't know. That just confused
Sorry, can
me.
you guys hear me? My audio is like bugging out.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Yeah, I think how many seconds was? I don't know. That's
He
a
was
big
around
gap
six.
because
He finished around 6 seconds ahead of Albon and Norris, who are kind of right next to each other.
yeah.
I don't know. It's fine if you don't know. I just watched the highlights
No,
at the end of the
I
race, and I was surprised to see that Hamilton got a penalty and didn't drop down the order. But whatever.
yeah. On my timing screen, it says it's 2.5. I think they applied the penalty post race though, right?
Yeah,
So
so he
to
must
be
have
honest,
7 seconds. Yeah, whatever. But
to be
yeah,
honest, I don't know. I just think the Williams it was good at defending because it's fast in a straight line, and perhaps it just wasn't good like pace wise. Like it was good at defending, at racing other cars, but wasn't good pace wise, and maybe that explains it. But still, like you said, it's a very big gap to pull out in 2 laps. And to be honest, I'm not honestly sure.
all right. But yeah, back to Piastri and Hamilton. Yeah, I mean that's just a deal where it's hard to officiate this sport in certain instances, and I don't know what more. I saw some people saying they should give Lewis a drive-through penalty, but it's just a hard sport to officiate when you get instances like this. So I think the 5 seconds was maybe the easiest thing for them to do.
I don't understand people who say that Lewis should have gone a drive-through. I think that's not justified, and I think it's kind of biased. But I can understand why they haven't, because back in 2021 when Lewis was racing Max, I kind of had those same sentiments, especially after Silverstone. But it just doesn't feel consistent with what the stewards are supposed to do. I want to say their philosophy of stewarding, because the point of a stewarding decision is not to, I guess, make things fair. It's not to drop Lewis to where Piastri ended up finishing. It's just to give out a penalty that is historically fair with this type of incident that occurred on track. So I think the 5 seconds was justified. I would say that it is completely Lewis's fault, as he admitted he just didn't really see Piastri on the outside. But like I said, I don't think it's more than 5 seconds. I think anything more than that is kind of unfair, to be honest, and not really consistent with what the stewards should be doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, moving on. We sort of touched on Williams in the whole pace thing, but good weekend by them. Albon P6 in quali, and then a P7 in the race. And Sargent, he didn't get into the points, but he had a very solid race overall. His qualifying was poor, given how we expected them to be. He was in P15, but then he was able to go down, and I think he sort of fell off later on into the race, but at some point he was up into P10. But yeah, Albon especially, Kenji, you said that you expected him to get at least P8 and wouldn't have been surprised for him to get higher. And he got P7, which is really solid given the Williams car compared to other ones. And you could say it's track specific, but Albon has been very, very solid in the last few races. I think he has 21 points right now, and which for in a Williams is very, very it's just very impressive, and it shows that he's he's just a world-class driver.
I would venture to say he's one of the best drivers this season. Um, Tim, I think all of the drivers in F1 are world-class drivers. Not to give you rubbish there, but yeah, this
I
is.
didn't know what to say, bro. I was
But
like, he's a good driver. Yeah.
yeah, I know what you're saying, but yeah, I would say he's one of the best drivers this season. No doubt about that. He kind of matched what I expected him to do here in Monza. P6 in qualifying, P7 at the flag. In fact, I thought that the ceiling this weekend was higher than it ended up being, but yeah, just great defending from Albon, making that Williams as wide as he could, keeping off Norris and Piastri, which, to be fair, with the straight line speed of McLaren is it's not as difficult as it might have been. But yeah, just a great drive from Albon. I don't have much more to add on him, fortunately. Sargent, I kind of expected more, to be honest. But I did read in like the press release that he had to give in like an older front wing because he kept like crashing at Zandvoort. So maybe that kind of affected the pace of that Williams car here in this weekend. But like I said, again, I expected more. I thought this was a good weekend for him to get his first points, and he didn't. So, yeah.
Yeah, another great weekend for Albon. As for Sargent, I don't want to really give up on him yet. I feel like he's always a little mistake away from like ruining his whole weekend almost. He's not good enough to go from P15 into the points in a Williams, but especially look at the last two rounds. I mean, you've got a good race car, and then he must have made a mistake in qualifying. I think he was way off the pace in Q2 on his final lap to get 15th, and then just made subtle improvements during the race, but couldn't. And then kind of the opposite in Zandvoort, where weirdly they also had pace, but crashed out before he could even have a chance at the randomness of that race had to offer, where he probably could have gotten a point as well. So we'll see. I think if he puts a weekend together at the right track, I think he could get a decent result. I think he definitely has a little bit of talent, but it's kind of he's yet to put together a perfect weekend yet. So, yeah, we'll see. I hope he can I hope he can kind of earn his seat for next year and not just have it based on money or just because he's American, you know. Next up, we got McLaren. I feel like we probably could have seen this coming and didn't really acknowledge that this car is still bad on the straights. It wasn't just a setup thing in Spa. It was a issue, and it's weird because, I mean, this car looked like it was about to be the challenger to Red Bull for those two rounds, and then there was Belgium, and then Zandvoort. Who knows what would have happened if it didn't rain? Obviously Norris qualified second, so could have been looking at a podium there, but another pretty bad weekend for McLaren. Only 4 points taken home. And, yeah, we'll see. Singapore should suit them a little bit better, but also has some decent amount of straightaways. It's mostly just 90-degree turns and straightaways, so yeah, Piastri obviously contact with Lewis took away some couple points from him, but yeah, McLaren has a straight line speed issue.
Yeah, even with their like straight line pace problems, I think it's important to keep McLaren's results in perspective. If you had gone to them at the start of the season and given them or offered them a P8 finish and said, Piastri probably would have scored if he didn't crash out with Lewis, I think they would have been very happy with that. So I think McLaren are still fine, and especially when they go to a track like Zandvoort, or not Zandvoort, I don't know what I'm saying, but like Singapore, which is kind of similar to Hungary. It's the street circuit, kind of, and a lot of corners. Even though there are some straights, I don't think they'll be like as significant as they were in Belgium or Monza, obviously. So I think once you get to tracks like that, maybe even Mexico too, because Mexico is not, it's usually an engine equalizer despite of the big straight because of the high altitudes. I think once you get to those tracks, McLaren could do better than they have been here at these low downforce tracks.
Yeah, we're out of the European leg, so into more kind of, I don't know. The remaining tracks have a lot of different variety, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Who's up next?
The
Alpha?
Aston Martin.
Oh, Aston Martin.
I mean, you said if you gave the McLaren a P8 finish earlier on in the season, they'd be happy, but it's almost the opposite for Aston Martin. If you told them that they'd be down in P9 and whatever, P16 with Stroll or whatever it was.
P-Stroll.
Then they would be very disappointed given that Alonso was consistently getting in the podium and Stroll was not as bad, although he was not up to par with Alonso. It's just a disappointing team. I mean, Alonso, he has the experience. I mean, we can tell that the car, in comparison to other cars, has been passed up. But I don't know. I'm sort of focusing more on Stroll and just the fact that he should not be doing as bad as he's doing. Like I don't think there are any excuses. Like Drugovich took his car in FP1, but like that's not even close to good for an excuse. He's putting his seat at risk, even though he has it locked in for another year. At least that's how I'm seeing it.
Yeah, I have no idea why they've been so bad. Maybe they used up their wind tunnel allocation or something, but yeah, they just haven't really upgraded the car, I guess, and they never were great in a straight line. So they were probably going to struggle here, but I mean, you're coming off a podium in Zandvoort that was pretty much on merit. Like the rain didn't really help Alonso that much, so they clearly had pace there. So we'll see what they can do the remainder of the season. But yeah, I mean Stroll, I don't even know what to say about him, man. He's been really bad. I mean, he got in that car in FP2, and the car said nah. So, like, I don't know. I feel like at this point he should just call it a career while he's slightly ahead. I mean, like, it could get worse. I mean, he's gotten a couple podiums, you know. Like, don't put yourself in a upper midfield car and finish in the bottom 5 every race. Like, that's hurting whatever whatever legacy you have. And how will this affect LeBron's legacy is my question. Okay. We're in the unhinged part of my... All right. Alfa Romeo, baby. I told y'all I've been riding Bottas all year. Finally.
Bro, a broken clock is correct twice a day. Like,
Finally.
if you guess Bottas like for points every weekend, like eventually it'll hit.
Finally,
I think my prediction about Albon being in the top 8 has more like, he should get some more credit from you guys.
You should.
Like, I think.
Oh, come on.
Yes,
yeah, we could see that coming from our way. Bottas is
no, you couldn't.
A black and red.
No, you
tractor,
couldn't,
bro. He's out here looking like a.
Well, yeah, but you guessed Alfa Romeo like the whole. You guessed him like the whole year, though.
The Agricola C34 or whatever. Fucking, that was crazy. I've been riding Bottas and Joe. Shoot, I might have to switch my fandom to Alfa Romeo, but they're not even a team anymore after this year. So, but you know, my boy Bottas, you put in the notes, Bottas got a point, which I think is very.
Is that his first point of the season?
No,
I don't think so.
Bottas is a dog.
Shut
I
up.
just-
You
I just-
needed someone to pick. That's all you needed.
I picked last, so who did you
I-
want me to pick? Both the Williams were taken.
I honestly was surprised he got a point. That's why I put Bottas got a point. I don't know. I didn't know what to
You know,
say.
it wasn't surprised me. I knew that was gonna happen, boy.
No, you didn't.
Stop, stop doubting my skills.
Bro, you sound like an economist. They like call like recessions every year and they never happen.
Okay,
Like, and then when they do happen, they're all correct.
all right. Nah, Bottas, it's tough. How many points does he have? 6. So he got a point in Canada and Italy, and then he got 8th in Bahrain for 4 points. So ahead of Joe, Sonoda. We've been praising Sonoda, Magnussen, Sargent, De Vries, and multiple-time race winner Daniel Ricciardo. So I say it's a pretty solid season in the black and red tractor. Go on, Alfa Romeo. Get that 8th place. Take it from Haas.
Anyway, on to Hugo Boss Racing. Liam Lawson with the P11 finish. Best finish by any AlphaTauri driver not named Yuki. Actually,
But not Bottas.
I think that Pierre
Couldn't-
Gasly
couldn't
won
be
a
Bottas.
race in that car.
Wow, great job, Tim. I think, wow.
Yeah, leave the humor to me.
Wow.
It wasn't even funny. Anyway, AlphaTauri kind of irrelevant, really, this race.
Yeah, good job by Lawson.
Good job by Lawson, but other than that,
Sonoda, I don't know what he's doing. Lawson was just rejected by Bottas's greatness. So, bummer for him. But he might grab a point. Wait, is Ricardo back next race?
no. Wait.
He
I
might be.
think-
It depends on how his recovery goes. I think
I
it's
said
2 weeks
his
from now
hand.
until Singapore.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Throw-
that's 2 weeks from now until Singapore.
Throw Lawson in there for one more. Get Ricardo back at Suzuka. Although Ricardo did do good at Singapore last time. I think he got 4th, which was easily his best race last year. What happened?
Nah. Ignore me.
Okay, well, you don't really talk in the podcast.
No,
anyway.
shut up. You don't even
Alpine,
do anything.
Alpine, way to bounce back to reality after that podium. Double Q1 exit, I believe. Average Alpine weekends, I guess. I don't really know how Ocon was fighting with Russell though. I guess it was one of them pit. I guess another one didn't.
Yeah, it was Russell who pitted, I think, and he dropped back. And then that's when he cut the corner, I believe.
Yeah. And then Haas.
And I have a single note on Haas because I don't know what they did.
I don't think
do
anyone
That
does.
sucked.
anything.
Haas and Stroll.
Yeah.
They should make their own team. And just kind of, I bet they were driving the old layout and just the ring out in the woods. No one saw them.
Yeah. Man, I just want them to.
Remember last year, like the first race, Magnussen's out there beating the Mercedes.
That's
and
like
stuff.
happened like a couple times too. I remember in
Magnussen
like
got pole.
I remember like the first Drive to Survive episode. It was when Haas was tearing it up
In Australia,
in
right?
Australia, and then they both DNF.
The tires came off.
After yeah. I'm not gonna lie.
I think Mick Schumacher had more crashes last year than they have points this year. Yeah, weird
Yeah,
car, real
also
weird car.
more
I don't
than-
know about that.
And
Yeah.
I think Hulkenberg got 11th in qualifying again though. So
really? This race?
he got into the points off like the first lap. I think he got past Alonso.
Hulkenberg was 13th. And
Well, he just had a good
yeah,
start.
that's close enough.
He got
yeah.
a good start and was in 10th for a while, but we know that
Yeah.
car has worse race pace.
Race
than Alfa
pace
Romeo,
problem.
So Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't even know.
Figure it out, Gunther.
Yeah,
I mean-
Magnussen. I like Magnussen, and he's just not had a great year.
They're both on next year with Haas,
they
correct?
signed back, but Magnussen doing so good last year was kind of, what's the word? Whatever. It was good to see Magnussen perform good last year, and I didn't really expect Hulkenberg to come in and kind of beat him so bad.
Yeah.
But all right, Singapore next up. Got another break for whatever reason, but Singapore, then Japan, and then we head over to the Americas, maybe. Yeah, and then back to Arabia. But Singapore, good race last year, and always an interesting one, the original night race. We'll be back to cover that one next time, guys. Until then, thank you for listening to Inside the Paddock, and goodbye.